The lock clicked shut with a final hollow sound that echoed through the concrete walls. I sat on the cold floor of my own basement, staring at the shadow of the door above me, watching as the faint strip of light disappeared. Darkness swallowed everything. My son's voice carried down through the heavy door, calm, reassuring, as if he were tucking me in for the night. "Mom, it's for your safety. You wander at night, you forget things. It's better if you stay down here for a while." A pause, then the lighter, sharper voice of my daughter-in-law, dripping with false sweetness. "She'll thank us one day, Ethan. We're just protecting her from herself." Footsteps faded. Silence pressed against my ears. I sat very still, my hands trembling only slightly. They thought I was confused, fragile, too old to question what was happening. But in that suffocating stillness, my mind was sharper than it had been in years. The air in the basement smelled of mildew and cardboard. Somewhere in the corner, water dripped slowly, marking time like a cruel metronome. My eyes adjusted, outlines of boxes and furniture emerging from the gloom. My knees ached from the hard floor, but I didn't move yet. I just listened. Above me, faint voices carried, muffled, whispered, conspiratorial. "She can't sign anything in this state," Ethan muttered. "The court will believe us when we say she's losing her mind. We'll have control of everything soon. And then the house is ours," Juliet replied. "No more waiting. No more pretending to play nice." The words sliced through me. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling the sting of humiliation mix with a slow, burning anger. For months they had been planting seeds, telling neighbors I was forgetful, telling doctors I misplaced things, telling me I was too frail to manage alone. They had rehearsed this story until it became their reality. But they had forgotten one thing. The burner was off. The light wasn't even blinking. "I turned it off," I said, puzzled. He softened, like he'd practiced the expression in a mirror. "Maybe you did. Maybe I'm just overthinking. I'm just concerned." Concern tasted like pity. It stuck to the back of my throat. The next week, Juliet stopped by with a glossy brochure. She laid it on my kitchen table like a gift. "A new community just opened 2 blocks from the park," she said, voice sweet as frosting. "Chef-prepared meals, on-site medical care. It would be so much safer. Don't you want to feel cared for?" I picked up the brochure and skimmed the images. Silver-haired people laughing with wine glasses and sunsets too perfect to be real. I traced a finger along the neat rows of text. Enhanced memory care, medication management, 24/7 monitoring. It made independence sound like a diagnosis. "I like my house," I said gently. Juliet's smile tightened. "Of course you do. Everyone likes their comfort zone. But what if you fall? Who will find you?" "I've fallen before," I said. I got up. The air cooled a few degrees. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the move she made when she was deciding how hard to push. "Ethan and I just want what's best. You've lived a good life. It's time to let people help you." I didn't say what burned in my chest. Help often looks like control to the person holding the leash. The next month, a doctor arrived, a house call, the kind that's supposed to feel old-fashioned and caring. He had soft hands, an apologetic smile, and a clipboard that clipped truth into boxes. He asked me questions so simple a child could answer them, all while glancing at Juliet for confirmation. "What day is it, Mrs. Hughes?" "Thursday," I answered. "You'll be late to your next appointment if you don't leave by 4. He blinked, checking his watch. It was 3:18. I could practically hear Juliet taste the phrase like honey. The next time I misplaced my phone, Juliet found it inside the refrigerator and held it up, triumphant, like a magician revealing a rabbit. "You see what I mean, Ethan?" she said, full of sympathy, that didn't reach her eyes. It's getting worse. I looked at the phone. It wasn't my model. The case was wrong. The crack didn't match. They had a decoy. That night, I sat at my dining table, long after the dishes were dry, staring at the old oak surface where 1,000 meals had been eaten, where Ethan had done homework, where Robert and I had paid bills with pens that leaked blue ink onto our fingers. I ran my hand across the grain, the nicks and scratches that mapped a life lived without fear of a little mess. If this table could talk, it would have laughed them out of the room. I pulled out a notebook, not the elegant leather kind people buy to feel significant, but the cheap spiral from the drugstore with a cover that peeled at the corners. I began to write dates, nothing dramatic, just small things, who stopped by, what they said, what I did next. It felt ridiculous at first, like I was taking notes on my own existence to prove it was real. But every war has a ledger before it has a battle. At church, Mrs. Ramirez took my hand a little too gently, like I might crumble. "Juliet told me you were forgetting your appointments, dear. Don't you worry, we all have seasons." "She told you that?" I asked evenly. "She's such a devoted daughter-in-law," she said, beaming, "bringing you soup, organizing your pills." I didn't have pills to organize beyond a once-daily vitamin and the occasional calcium tablet, but organizing pills conjured a picture, and pictures move faster than facts. The narrative was spreading. When I drove to the grocery store and paused at the end of my street, waiting for a cyclist to pass, Mr. Halverson waved me down and leaned into my window. "If you need a ride, Aurora, just call me. Better safe than sorry, eh?" Julie, spelled with an II, the neighbor I'd known for 20 years, left me a voicemail that kept ending in half sentences. "We just figured with your, it's late and you must get so tired. We can fill you in next time." I didn't call back. I made tea. I sat in my chair. I listened to my house breathe. It had a rhythm I recognized. Houses do. They expand and contract with heat and cold, settle more deeply in their foundations with each season. They creak in voices that belong to the people who keep them. My house knew me, and I knew it. That was why 2 nights later, I heard the whisper of the basement door when it opened, the tiniest scrape, the kind you only notice if you've oiled the hinges yourself every spring for 30 years. I stood quietly in the hallway, in the dark, just beyond the banister. Ethan's footsteps on the stairs were a rhythm I would know anywhere. He'd been a heavy-footed child, all momentum and knees and elbows, and he'd never learned to walk softly. Juliet's heels clicked behind him. 2 sets of shadows slid along the wall. They didn't turn on the light. They moved like people who believed darkness belonged to them. At the bottom of the stairs, I heard cardboard shift. Juliet whispered, "Keep the ledger box accessible. I want to show Bob on Saturday. He thinks we can get a court date by next month if we document patterns." "Patterns," Ethan echoed. He sounded tired, not regretful, tired. "We need a record of incidents," Juliet said. "The kettle, the phone in the fridge, the time she left the door unlocked." "That door locks itself," Ethan said. "She won't know that," Juliet replied. "It's the impression that matters." My palms went cold. They weren't recording reality. They were fabricating impressions. And they were storing the props in my basement. And Aurora, tell at least one neighbor who isn't in their orbit. Pick a Joseph. Every story like this needs a Joseph. I thought of John from 3 doors down, retired, always on his porch with a crossword and a radio tuned to the baseball game. He'd taught Ethan to throw a curveball the summer Ethan turned 11, when Robert was traveling too much to make it to the park as often as he wanted. John would believe me. He'd watch. He'd listen. When I got home, the house felt different, not smaller, sharper, like a camera had finally clicked into focus. I tucked the voice recorder in the ceramic bowl on the hallway table, the one that had always held keys and change and whatever clattered from pockets at the end of a day. I placed the motion camera among the photo frames on the mantel, angled toward the hallway where whispers liked to travel. I drafted a letter to my bank naming Maggie as my emergency contact for suspicious activity. I slipped the envelope into my purse and walked it to the blue box on the corner, listening to the metallic slide of paper into a machine designed to carry truths farther than a person sometimes can. When I returned, Juliet's car was in the driveway. The front door was ajar. "Aurora," she called, voice bright. "I thought I'd surprise you with lunch." In the living room, she'd already set out food on the coffee table. Soup, sandwiches, napkins folded into cranes. It would have been sweet if the air didn't smell like intention. "I can't stay long," she said, lifting the lid on the soup with a flourish. "We have a meeting with a friend, but I wanted to check on you. How are you feeling? Any confusion today?" "Clear as glass," I said. She smiled like she didn't hear me. "Good, good. Because we thought maybe, just maybe, it's time to have a practical conversation. About the house. About caretaking. You know, responsible planning." Responsible planning, I thought. Ladling cold tomato bisque into porcelain like it cost more if you looked helpless. "It's not about control, Aurora. It's about care. Guardianship is such a scary word, but it can be a kindness when someone's declining." Click. The recorder in the bowl caught every consonant. "Declining how?" I had asked, keeping my tone as smooth as her lipstick. She tilted her head. "The day you called me Julie? You've known me for 3 years, sweetheart." She flashed teeth. "That's a sign." "Or you're not memorable," I said, smiling back. Her laugh was a second too late. She recovered. "Bob's drawing up options. Just options. He thinks a doctor's letter plus our incident log will be plenty to get a quick hearing, given the safety issues. Doors left unlocked, stovetops, wandering, that sort of thing." "Who's Bob?" I asked. "A friend," she said. "Helps families with transitions." Translation: a lawyer who liked clean transfers of power more than messy human lives. When she left, she kissed the air by my cheek like we were on a Paris sidewalk. Her perfume clung to my sweater, a field of flowers sprayed out of a can. The door closed. I stood in my quiet house and listened to the idea of guardianship echo in the drywall. Guardianship. Like I was a ward of my own child. No. Before the sun set, I took 3 steps that didn't fit their script. First, I knocked on John's door, the neighbor with the permanent baseball game on his radio and the dependable kind of concern that doesn't condescend. "Got a minute?" I asked. "For you, an hour," he said, ushering me onto the porch. He poured coffee that tasted like the 1970s and tilted an ear. I told him the short version. Not hysterical, not accusatory. My hand didn't shake when I wrote my name. When Dr. Ahmed returned with the results, she smiled. "If anyone tries to take your rights, they're going to have a very boring time in court." "Put it in big letters," I said, "and email a copy to my attorney." "Done," she said, curiosity flickering but not pushing. The best doctors know when not to pry. Third, I photographed my life, driver's license, title to the house, the advance directive Robert and I had drawn up when he got sick, The one naming Maggie, not Ethan, as my medical proxy if an accident turned me into a question mark. I set up an email rule to auto-forward copies to a cloud folder Maggie controlled. Paper gets lost. Cloud keeps receipts. By dusk, my house felt like mine again, not because I'd barred the doors, but because I'd opened my eyes. That night, I slept in socks and the sweatshirt with my phone charging in a wall outlet behind the bookcase, out of sight to anyone who'd tidy. I woke at 2:12 a.m. to the soft complaint of the basement hinges. The hallway was dark. The rail was cool under my palm. I moved like the house taught me to move, knowing where the floor talks and where it holds its breath. At the top of the basement stairs, I paused, listening. Whisper scrapes. Cardboard. Paper sliding. A box thumped. A small curse. Juliet, not as graceful in the dark as she pretended in the light. When the noises stopped, I counted to 60. Then I counted to 60 again. The front door closed. Silence reassembled itself, like a stage set after the actors left. I flicked on the stair light and took each step like a metronome. At the bottom, the basement smell rose, the old mineral scent of concrete, old boxes, and summers soaked into wood. The air was cooler. I felt clear in it. The ledger box was where they'd left it, tucked under a plastic tub labeled Xmas lights. I slid it free and flipped the metal latch. Inside, a blue notebook with a bio that used compassionate too many times. Behind it, drafts of a petition for temporary guardianship, already filled in with my name, my alleged decline, and the proposed guardian, Ethan, with Juliet listed as primary caregiver. They planned to take the house first, then the accounts, then me. Beneath the legal drafts sat financial statements that weren't mine. A stack of red-dashed past due notices with Ethan's name blared from envelopes. Credit cards with balances that looked like down payments. A car note months behind. An email thread about a wedding photographer demanding final payment. So that was the engine behind the kindness. I took photos of everything, every page, every lie. The camera shutter was a quiet click, but each capture felt like a firecracker in my chest. I emailed the images to Maggie with a subject line, "Their ledger." The progress bar slid across the screen like a lifeline. There was one more folder in the bottom of the box, thin, almost empty. I opened it with a foreboding I couldn't name. Inside, 2 versions of a will. Mine. One real, dated a year after Robert died, leaving the house to me and investments to a trust we'd named for scholarships. The other, a counterfeit template with my name and a different signature, shaky but passable, moving the house to family control for care decisions. They weren't just going to take my guardianship. They were going to rewrite my after. I felt my throat tighten, but not with fear, with clarity. I slid the real will into my sweatshirt, tucked flat along my back. The fake, I photographed and returned to the box exactly as I found it. On the way up the steps, I stopped and looked back. A strip of light edged the door where it met the frame. The house held its breath. In my bedroom, I opened the shoebox where I kept Robert's letters. I slid. Ahmed's letter had landed in Maggie's inbox. By 2, my bank manager had updated my file with a single powerful sentence. No third-party access, no co-signatures, no POA updates without in-person verification and lawyer present. By 4, the locksmith had swapped out deadbolts so cleanly, even a practiced intruder wouldn't spot the difference. At 5, Ethan texted, "We're dropping by after dinner. Need to talk. Next steps." Next steps. I set my phone face down and looked at the mantel, the tiny camera side, still and ready. The recorder waited, patient as a witness. The house settled its shoulders. If they wanted a guardian, they were about to meet a general. They came at 7:03 p.m., right on schedule. Juliet first, loading the doorway with perfume and purpose. Ethan behind her, with the man I hadn't met yet. Tan suit, perfect teeth, a briefcase that looked like it had never known dust. "Mom?" Ethan said, forcing a smile that never reached his eyes. "This is Bob. He helps families." "Transitions," Bob added smoothly, extending a hand I didn't take. His voice had the texture of velvet and the temperature of ice. "We specialize in compassionate guardianship solutions. Nothing adversarial, all supportive." "Wonderful," I said, letting the word sit in the air like a trap. "Come in." I'd set the room deliberately, lights warm but not dim, a tray with cups and the pot of tea, the mantel tidy, the tiny motion camera nestled between Robert's watch and our 25th anniversary photo. The hallway table held the ceramic bowl full of keys and the thumb-sized recorder disguised under a layer of coins. In the corner, a well-worn armchair angled toward the doorway, the seat I took because it placed their backs to the camera and their faces to me. "Tea?" I asked, lifting the lid with a smile. "I made jasmine." Ethan blinked at me. "Smells lovely," Juliet said, eyes flitting around the room, catalog audible, so I can refer back to it later if my memory fails. Bob hesitated for a hair's breadth, then arranged his face back into a benevolent mask. "Transparency is healthy." "Wonderful," I said again. He placed a slim stack of papers on the table and slid them toward me. "We've prepared a temporary guardianship petition, purely provisional. Think of it like putting a safety harness on someone who insists on climbing a ladder. In the best-case scenario, we never need it. But if something were to happen, I echoed, and let my hand drift not toward his papers but toward a different envelope I'd laid beneath the tray. I set it gently on top of his stack. "Before we discuss ladders and harnesses, you might want to read this." Juliet's brows pulled gently together. "What's that?" "A letter," I said, sipping tea, "from Dr. Ahmed. Neuropsych evaluation, cognitive panel. Yesterday." Juliet didn't reach for it. Bob did. He skimmed the first paragraph, then read the second one slower. The third stopped him. His mouth tightened despite himself. He passed the letter to Juliet like it might burn. She scanned it, color rising under her foundation. "This doesn't mean anything," she said too quickly. "Doctors can be wrong." "Of course," I agreed, which is why there's also a copy on file with my attorney, and my bank, and in the cloud. Bob cleared his throat. "Guardianship isn't only about memory. It's about judgment, safety, risk mitigation. We have an incident log that—" "The ledger?" I asked, and watched Juliet's pupils contract. "Neat blue notebook? Tabs? Photos paperclipped to fabricated stories? I like your label maker, by the way." Ethan's eyes snapped to mine. "Mom, you were at my house at 2:09 a.m. this morning," I said, calmly as weather. "Downstairs." Juliet. Easier meant liquidating what you can't pay for. Easier meant calling theft, care, and hoping I'd confuse the vocabulary. Juliet's voice sharpened. "No one is stealing anything. This is about your safety." "Great," I said lightly. "Let's talk about safety." I stood, walked to the sideboard, and returned with another paper. Set it down next to Bob's stack as though we were trading recipes. "This is my durable power of attorney, executed after Robert died. It names Maggie Ruiz, my attorney, as my agent if I'm incapacitated. It specifically excludes Ethan from serving in that role, per my choice at the time. She has copies, so does the bank." Bob's lips moved around the name. "Maggie Ruiz." You know her, I said. Legal aid, 40 years, hands like light. She asked me to tell you she'll be happy to meet you at the courthouse if you file. She enjoys mornings. Juliet's hand shook. This is turning ugly. It doesn't have to be ugly. That depends, I said, settling back into my chair, on whether you brought anything else you want to stage while you're here. The stove is off. The door locks itself. The pills are vitamins, but please, if you plan on slipping my phone into the freezer, at least bring one that matches the crack. Ethan flinched like I'd slapped him. Juliet. He turned, searching her face. We didn't. Her glare cut him off. You're not helping. A soft knock at the door floated down the hall, 3 quick, 2 slow. John's pattern. I didn't look away from Juliet. Do you mind? I asked and rose. John stood on the porch with a manila envelope and a neighborly smile. Evening, Aurora. Mail mix-up. Again. His eyes flicked past my shoulder, noting the extra shoes on the rug, the briefcase on the floor. Regardless of disagreements tonight, the petition is ready. We'll be filing first thing in the morning. Wonderful, I said a 3rd time, and smiled. Maggie will see you at 9. Dr. Ahmed's letter will see you at 9:05. The porch footage at 9:10. The basement photos at 9:15. And the voice memo of Juliet describing your incident log as impressions at... What time was it, dear? Oh yes, 7:11 p.m. will round us out before lunch. Juliet stared at the small black recorder on the table like it had grown fangs. You can't. I did, I said. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The house held their shapes like a camera exposure. Juliet taut as wire, Bob calculating, Ethan deflating into himself. Somewhere on the block a dog barked twice, the sound of ordinary life continuing without us. This conversation, I said at last standing, is over. You're in my home. You can walk out the door, or I can call someone to show it to you. Either way, we're done here. Ethan stood slowly, eyes fixed on the floor. Juliet followed, scooping her papers so fast she left a corner of the guardianship petition peeking from under the stack. Bob closed his briefcase with a click that sounded smaller than it had when he walked in. At the threshold, Juliet turned. You'll regret this. I held her gaze. I already did. That's why it won't happen again. The door closed behind them. The lock hummed into place. My house exhaled. I picked up the recorder, clicked it off, and only then realized my hands were steady. On the table, Dr. Ahmed's letter lay next to Maggie's power of attorney like 2 bookends holding my life upright. My phone buzzed. A text from Maggie. Sleep. Court tomorrow. This is Officer Reed with the Community Response Team. We received a concern call about your welfare and wanted to check in. Concern call, I repeated. The jasmine hedge outside was still beaded with dew. At 6 a.m. Call came overnight, the officer said, professional, neutral. This is a courtesy visit. Are you safe? I am, I said. Would you mind giving me 1 minute? I closed the door, unhooked the chain, and opened it wide. Come into the entry. Shoes on, please. We'll stay right here. Dana stepped over the threshold with practiced care, eyes taking a calibrated snapshot of the scene. Neat hallway, framed photos, the faint scent of coffee. Officer Reed followed, hands visible, gaze soft. I'm fine, I said, before they could begin their script. I'm also expecting a court hearing at 9. A family member is attempting to secure guardianship. I have documentation you may find helpful. Dana blinked. Most people scramble. I was ready. We're just here to make sure you're okay. I know, I said, pulling a slim folder from the entry table drawer. Here's yesterday's cognitive evaluation from my longtime physician. Here's my durable power of attorney, naming my attorney as agent. Here's a bank notice restricting account changes, and here, I held up a still printout, is a photo of my daughter-in-law entering my yard at 2:09 a.m. this morning to stage incidents to support their petition. Officer Reed looked between the pages with a cop's poker face, but an eyebrow that couldn't help itself. Dana took the papers with professional calm, reading fast, then slower, then exhaling. Do you take any medications? She asked gently. Calcium and a multivitamin, I said. I can recite my last 3 blood panels and my voter registration precinct if it helps. She smiled despite herself. I may take you up. I changed into a navy dress that had been to graduations and a funeral and sat in a closet since. Robert had always said I looked like a verdict in it. I pinned my hair back, slid Dr. Ahmed's letter into my leather folio, and tucked the recorder into my purse like a talisman. On the way out, I paused by the mantel. Robert's watch. Our 25th anniversary photo. The small camera blinked its tiny green light, proof that it had seen and kept, and would tell if asked. Hold the house, I told it, and locked the door. Maggie met me on the courthouse steps in a charcoal suit that had seen entire municipal budgets rise and fall. She hugged me, briskly, efficiently, like checking a pulse, and handed me a canvas tote. What's this? I asked. Redundancy, she said. Inside, a tabbed binder labeled Hughes, evidence. A second copy of Dr. Ahmed's letter in a plastic sleeve, a chain of custody log for the porchcam files, and a notarized affidavit from John stating times, dates, and a brief description of the footage. A flash drive sat in a Ziploc, labeled in black Sharpie, porch, 2:09 a.m., kitchen, phone. You think of everything, I murmured. I've seen everything, she said. And it all repeats. The courtroom was one of those municipal rooms that tries to look grand and only manages beige. Fluorescent lights, bolted benches, a flag drooping toward the clerk's desk. The judge, Honorable Lisa Carr, entered with the efficiency of a woman who has no intention of wasting anyone's time. On the other side of the aisle, Ethan sat beside Juliet and Bob. Juliet wore a cardigan that said compassion, a bun that said control, and a facial expression that said Oscar. Ethan stared at his hands. Bob looked like a magazine ad for quiet competence. The judge glanced at the docket. I respond that there has been a coordinated effort to manufacture a narrative of decline that does not exist, in order to secure control of my home and assets. I have evidence, Your Honor. Maggie stepped forward, handing the clerk the binder and flash drive like a magician revealing a dove. Respondents' Exhibits A through H, she said. A. Neuropsychological evaluation from Dr. S. Ahmed, respondent's primary care physician of 8 years, dated yesterday. Clear cognition. No signs consistent with guardianship. B. Power of attorney executed post-widowhood naming counsel as agent if incapacitated. C. Bank directive restricting third-party changes. D through F. Photographs of petitioners entering respondent's property at 2:09 a.m. the morning of this hearing and manipulating household items to appear as incidents. G. Still of tape placed over respondent's door latch to prevent locking. H. Audio recording from the evening prior in which petitioner Ms. Dawson refers to their incident log as impressions. Bob opened his mouth. Maggie kept going. Additionally, Your Honor, sworn affidavit from neighbor John Ellison authenticating porch camera footage with chain of custody log. The clerk passed the packet to Judge Carr. She read the top page quickly, skimmed the next, then glanced at Bob. Mr. Klein. Your Honor, he began, voice still even. We question the provenance of these. The porch cam footage shows your client at 2:09 a.m., the judge said, tapping a nail on the photograph. In the respondent's yard. That's a curious time for compassion. Juliet flushed. I was checking on her. By taping her latch? The judge asked, lifting Exhibit G. It must have been there already, Juliet said too fast. Judge Carr said, which is judge for you're lying but I'm letting you finish hanging yourself. She turned to me. Next case. It was over in under 9 minutes. Outside in the hallway, the air tasted different, lighter. Maggie squeezed my shoulder. You did beautifully, she said. Judges like facts. We gave her facts. Juliet swept past us, cheeks blazing, whispering to Bob about appeals and how this isn't over. Ethan trailed behind, paused, and looked at me with a small, ruined expression. I'm sorry, he said, the words a paper boat in a flood. I heard you, I said. Now live it. He nodded once, a man who had learned what it feels like when ground refuses to hold. He followed Juliet out into the late morning, into whatever story they thought they still had left. Maggie handed me the tote again. Take this home, she said. Put it somewhere that smells like safety. My dresser, I said, behind Robert's letters. She smiled. Perfect. On the steps, John lifted a hand from across the street like clockwork, like church bells. The porch cam had caught a piece of a night that could have rewritten my life. The morning had written it back. At the curb, the jasmine hedge stirred in a mild breeze. For once, the scent wasn't cloying. It was just a plant doing what it does, unaware of the human theater it borders. Coffee? Maggie asked. Yes, I said, and took her arm as we turned toward the corner cafe. Strong enough to stand a spoon. The cafe at the corner had the kind of coffee that could sand old paint, exactly what I needed. Maggie stirred hers twice and then forgot about it, already in step 2 mode. Here's how we keep the win from slipping, she said, flipping open a legal pad. Credit freeze with all 3 bureaus, fraud alert on your file, title monitoring for the house, lock your tax transcript at the IRS, USPS informed delivery so you see if anyone forwards your mail, new passwords, new answers to security questions. The bank's fraud unit answered on the second ring. This is Carla, a woman said, bright but unflappable, like she'd wrestled every kind of story to the ground. I explained the situation. She listened without interrupting, typed fast, and then hummed low. Funny you should call, she said. We had a flagged attempt last night. Male caller asked to add himself as authorized to discuss. Claimed to be your son, said you were too upset to talk. He tried to give a safe word. It was wrong. We denied him and locked your profile until we could reach you. Time? I asked, already knowing the answer would make me tired and grateful in equal measure. 2:43 a.m. Juliet was in my yard at 2:09, I said. They like the night. Carla's voice warmed. They won't like us. We'll add a note, in person only, government ID, and bank manager present for any profile changes. And Ms. Hughes, yes? I'm sorry you're dealing with this. It happens more than you think. but you handled it faster than most. I hung up and stood for a moment in my kitchen, the afternoon light falling across the floor in long, friendly stripes. The house hummed like it had swallowed sunlight. I checked the porch camera. The last clip was me, walking inside with a tote and a victory that fit in a binder. At 3:11 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. DA's elder abuse investigator wants your packet. Bar complaint already open on Bob. Also, Dr. Harding is concierge mobile, not your PCP. We'll loop the medical board. A minute later. P.S. Title monitor shows a soft inquiry attempted this morning. Blocked by freeze. Good catch. I sent back a single word. Jasmine. Then added, but the window's shut. The doorbell rang at 4. I peeked. It was John, holding 2 camp chairs like we were tailgating justice. Neighborhood association wants to hear it from you. I didn't need pity, and I didn't want gossip. I wanted the tide to turn in the quiet way tides do. When we finished, people nodded like they'd taken off sunglasses and could finally see a cloud for what it was. Julie with an IE stepped forward last, cheeks pink. I'm sorry about the book club, she said. I let her plant a story in my head. It won't happen again. It's okay, I said, and meant it. We all get fooled. The trick is not staying fooled. As the little crowd dispersed, a delivery van rolled up. The driver jogged my way with a padded envelope and a practiced smile. Signature? I signed and tore it open in the foyer. Inside, a photocopy of a will, the counterfeit one I'd found in the basement, now bearing a notary stamp I hadn't seen before. The name leaped from the seal. Karen Dawson. Juliet's mother. There was a sticky note on top, the handwriting unfamiliar. Thought you should have the latest draft. K. A trap? A flex? Or arrogance so thick they mistook daylight for cover? I snapped 3 photos and texted them to Maggie. New mail. Counterfeit will with notary stamp. Karen Dawson. Her reply came fast. On it, State Notary Registry. If the stamp is real, she's in trouble. If it's stolen, she's in more. Don't respond. I tucked the envelope into the tote with the rest of the week's insanity and went to water the philodendron that had survived 3 administrations and 1 hailstorm. Normal things matter when the abnormal tries to colonize your mind. At dusk, the streetlights blinked alive, one by one, as if the city were lifting its chin. I made dinner, a grilled cheese I ate standing at the counter, because grief has a way of making chairs feel like too much effort, and washed the plate with the same circles my mother taught me. My phone pinged. Maggie again. Notary board confirms. Karen Dawson is commissioned. They're opening an inquiry. DA investigator wants your original basement photos plus envelope. Tomorrow at 10? Yes, I typed. Then, because truth shouldn't always taste like metal, I added, bring your worst coffee. I'll bring the good stuff. I checked the locks, turned off the lights, and stood a moment in the doorway of my bedroom. The binder on the dresser glowed faintly in the streetlight, a private lighthouse. Outside, somewhere, a siren wailed, far away. Inside, the house breathed. Before I slept, I slid Ethan's letter under Robert's watch. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a place where something honest could rest until I knew what to do with it. The jasmine outside the window stirred in a cooler breeze. For once, it didn't make me sick. I closed the window anyway, enough sweetness for one day. Morning found me before the alarm did, The kind of alertness you don't earn from sleep, but from the knowledge that a page is about to turn. I brewed coffee strong enough to protest and packed the tote Maggie had given me. Binder, flash drive, porch stills, the counterfeit will with Karen Dawson's notary stamp, and the padded envelope it wrote in like a confession. I placed Ethan's letter under Robert's watch on the dresser, the new fragile thing protected by the old steady one, and left the house with the sense that the walls themselves were standing a little straighter. The district attorney's building was municipal beige outside, municipal beige inside, but the woman who met us in a small conference room had eyes that made the room sharper. "Maya Collins," she said, shaking my hand like she meant it. "Elder Abuse Unit." She wore flats, no nonsense, a pen tucked behind one ear, a legal pad that already had my name on it in neat block letters. Maggie slid the tote across the table like an offering. "Timeline's in the binder. If she notarized without you present, that's misconduct. If she knowingly notarized a forgery, that's criminal. If she lent her stamp to someone else, that's stupider than criminal, because it leaves a trail." She flipped to the page with the taped latch photo and tapped it with her pen. "Criminal trespass. Burglary in some jurisdictions if they entered to commit a crime. Attempted financial exploitation of an elder. False statements to a court if they swore out that petition with staged incidents." Maggie leaned back, satisfied but not smug. "We're also filing a bar complaint on their attorney, Mr. Klein. He represented he had a treating physician, when in fact he had a concierge house caller hired by the petitioners." "Dr. Harding," Maya said, looking down the list like she already knew the name. "We've seen him in 2 other guardianship attempts this year. He likes cash and adjectives." She turned to me again. "What do you want out of this, Miss Hughes? I don't mean the legal boxes. I mean you." "I want it to stop," I said simply. "I want my house to breathe. I want my name to mean me. I want whatever comes next to happen because I chose it, not because someone rehearsed a script louder than I could tell the truth." She nodded. "Good. We can't promise outcomes, but we can promise momentum." She slid a consent form toward me. "With your permission, we'll seize the notary record from Ms. Dawson, subpoena Dr. Harding's notes, and interview your son. If he cooperates, that can affect charging decisions. If he doesn't, that can too." "He wrote me a letter," I said. "Not an excuse, not a bargain. It sounded like a man looking at himself without blinking, but wanting to be better and choosing to be better are cousins who don't always write to each other." "Understood." Maya said, "If he wants to talk, he can call me. If he doesn't, I'll call him." We signed papers, handed over the envelope, logged the flash where Carla greeted me like a regular, and printed out a 1-page profile full of red flags that said, in effect, "Do not let this woman be erased by a phone call at 2:43 a.m. At 11:17 a.m., mid-sip of institutional coffee and gratitude, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "Hughes," I said, because apparently I was a sheriff now. "Miss Hughes," a man's voice said, halting. "It's Dr. Harding." I raised an eyebrow at the universe. "Doctor," I said, "how did you get my number?" Your daughter-in-law provided it," he said, and cleared his throat. "I wanted to apologize for any distress my home assessment caused." "Your home assessment consisted of asking me the day of the week and whether I know the president, then whispering to my daughter-in-law in the hall," I said. "You didn't check the smoke detectors. You didn't open the fridge. You didn't ask who made the soup in front of you. That's not an assessment. That's a letter of marque." Silence. Then, with the deflated dignity of a man who sees the office door he can't close, he said, "The DA contacted me. They've requested my files." "Good," I said. "They love adjectives." "I regret any misunderstanding," he managed. "I regret that people sell their licenses for coins," I replied, and hung up before righteous anger could make me something I didn't want to be. At noon, I stopped at the florist on the corner and bought grocery store tulips because sometimes small, loud colors are the only rebellion that fits in a vase. I was arranging them in the kitchen when my phone buzzed again. Blocked call. "This is Mike Benson with Benson and Keys Locksmiths, just confirming a rekey appointment at 2 p.m. for your address. Work order placed by a Miss Dawson, says she's the homeowner." I smiled. Not nice. "Mike, if you come to my house at 2 p.m. and try to change my locks, you will meet 2 officers and a DA investigating," and talked about everything but the case until I was breathing like a person again. "Got a call," he said finally, eyes on the rind, "from the neighborhood watch lady. Asked if you needed meals. I said no. You need witnesses." He looked up. "We got those." Before dinner, the phone lit again. Unknown number. Nervous energy. "Ms. Hughes?" Ethan's voice, thinner than letters on a page. "I have a protective order," I said gently. "You can't call me." "I know," he said quickly. "Maya said I could leave you one message through her office. She's here. I'm in a conference room. I wanted to say I told the truth. All of it. About the ledger, the doctor, the notary. I told them the money we owed. How I let Juliet talk about you like a problem to be solved. I told them I taped the latch. I told them it was my idea to—" He stopped, choked on it. "No excuses," he said, smaller. "I'm done with those." My throat tightened, not with pity, not with triumph, just with the weight of knowing the boy I raised and the man he'd become were finally in the same room together. "You do the right thing in the light," I said. "The light will do what the light does." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I don't expect anything. I just didn't want you to hear it from papers later." "Thank you," I said, because sometimes 2 words are all that fits between the past and the future without ripping. "Follow the law, follow your own eyes. That's all I have for you right now." "Okay," he said, and the line clicked softly. Maya taking the phone back from a son learning to talk like a person again. Evening settled without ceremony. I made soup, ate it with crackers, and read 3 pages of a novel that wasn't about anyone I knew. The house did what houses do. It held. At 8, I turned off the lamp and let the house breathe with me. The next morning, the sky had that bright, indifferent blue that makes courthouses look almost cheerful. I was halfway through a bowl of oatmeal when my phone buzzed with Maya's name. "Good morning," she said, voice steady. "Quick update. We executed a warrant on Ms. Dawson's notary records. Entries are inconsistent. 2 logs are missing pages. The stamp in your envelope matches her commission number, but the register shows no appointment for any signing with you. We're filing charges today. Attempted financial exploitation of an elder, criminal trespass, and notary misconduct. Dr. Harding's notes have also been subpoenaed." I exhaled through a smile I didn't mean to make. "And Ethan?" "He came in with counsel last night," she said. "He admitted his role. We'll recommend he be considered for cooperation credit. That doesn't erase harm, but it recognizes truth when it finally shows up." "Truth is a late bus," I said, "but I'll take it." "Also," Maya added, "I'm sending you a victim advocate. She'll walk you through impact statements and protective conditions. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do, but you don't have to do any of it alone." After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen and watched the sunlight travel across the floor like a slow dancer. The house was quiet. Not fragile quiet. Poised. By 10, I was at Maya's office again, this time in a room with softer lighting and a woman named Rena who had a box of tissues that, thankfully, I didn't need. She explained the timeline in clean, digestible pieces: arraignment, conditions, discovery, maybe a plea, maybe a trial. She said victim in a way that didn't feel like I was stuck in amber. She asked if I wanted a no-contact order extended for 6 months. Yes, I said. No calls, no letters. If Ethan wants to speak, he can go through you. I'm not a switch you flip because people learning new words like arraignment and bail and no. I threw a crust to a pigeon bold enough to claim it and thought of the boy who'd once fed ducks by my side, cheeks flushed, shoelaces untied. Maggie's office smelled like paper and peppermint. She had already pulled my trust, tabs sprouting from it like a paper forest. Here's what I recommend, she said, pen poised. We keep your revocable trust for liquidity, but we move the house into an irrevocable trust with you as lifetime beneficiary and me as trustee. You keep a life estate. No one can lien it for someone else's debts. No one can promise it on your behalf. Upon your passing, it transfers to the charitable remainder we discussed. That trust will have a spendthrift clause that makes it impossible for any would-be heir to assign their expectation to a creditor or spouse. In other words, your walls are the house's walls. No one gets to use them for a ladder. It sounds restful, I said. It's boring paper that stops exciting crime, she said. My favorite genre. We signed where the blue flags told me to sign. She notarized what needed notarizing, by the book in the room with a seal that would not be visiting any envelopes in the night. The deed transfer would record by the end of the week. The title monitor pinged a cheerful alert in my pocket 2 hours later. Title updated. Trust owner, Hughes Residence Trust. A guard taking a new post. At 3, Maya called again. They're bringing Ms. Dawson and Ms. Dawson the Elder in for booking. Initial appearance at 4. You don't need to be there, but if you want eyes on it, you can sit in the back. I didn't need to be there. I went anyway. The arraignment courtroom was smaller, closer, tired. When the side door opened, Juliet came in first, wrists free, chin high, as if she'd been invited to correct an administrative error. Karen followed, her face, next date in 3 weeks. As people shuffled papers in rows, Juliet turned in the aisle and found me in the back. For a beat, the courtroom seemed to narrow to a corridor between us. This isn't over, she mouthed. I tilted my head. It is for you. I mouthed back and watched the meaning land. In the hallway, I nearly bumped into Ethan. He was alone, no Juliet, no mother-in-law, no lawyer at his elbow. He wore a shirt that didn't fit right, weight lost or laundry shrunk, I couldn't tell. He saw me and froze, like a person who has just found a mirror in a strange house. I'm not supposed to talk to you, he said, stopping himself mid-step. The order. You aren't, I said. He nodded, then stared at the floor. I told them everything. I gave them my texts, the emails, the thing with the latch. I told them I called the bank. I told them it was my idea to hide the phone in the fridge because I knew you'd find it and look confused and... He stopped, the sentence collapsing under its own shame. I told them I watched you and said nothing. I let the silence sit in the space between us like a third person. Rena said I could, if you wanted, someday. Make amends in ways that aren't about money. He said, volunteer hours, programs for seniors. I'll do whatever she tells me to do. I'll do more. I know that doesn't do what needs doing. I know the math doesn't cancel. Math is for numbers, I said. Character uses a different ledger. He swallowed. Okay. I nodded to the door. Go on, I said. Follow the light. He left. I leaned against a cool marble wall and let my pulse slow to a pace that didn't hum. People passed. A woman with tears she was saving for outside. A man with a mouth set to war. A janitor pushing a cart with a quiet heroism no one put in a press release. Back home, the late light made the living room look like a photograph from a different decade. I set the new trust. I talked about the DA's office like it was a new library. When she left, She hugged me hard and said, "You look taller." "I signed papers that lengthened my spine," I said. Alone again, I stood at the back door and looked out at the jasmine hedge. It moved in the evening breeze like a crowd exhaling. I unlocked the door and opened it. The scent rolled in, sweet and clean, and not a trap. I closed it gently, turned the lock, and thought, not for the first time, safety isn't a secret. It's a practice. Upstairs, I slid the new binder into its place, laid my hand on the leather like a benediction, and turned off the lamp. The house breathed with me. The calendar pages didn't flip with drama. They turned with paperwork and small decisions. Charges were filed. A date on a docket became 2, then 3. I learned the architecture of a courthouse better than I'd ever wanted to. The way its elevators sighed. The way coffee tasted different in the morning than it did at 3 in the afternoon when the fluorescent lights began to hum like bees. Maya called when there was something worth knowing, not just to be busy. Notary board voted to suspend Ms. Dawson's commission pending outcome, she said one Tuesday. 2 days later, Dr. Harding accepted a consent order, license probation, ethics course, fine. The medical board has a long memory. She never said, "We've got them." She said, "The facts are moving." On a gray Thursday, Rena asked if I wanted to submit a victim impact statement. "You can write it, read it, or let it speak on paper," she said. "Or you can skip it. No wrong answer." I wrote it, not to vent, not to perform, to put a spine in the file that had my name on it. I did not describe the slap in the basement of my life, the night of the taped latch, the phone in the fridge. I said, "I am not a plot point in someone else's plan. And a deferred sentence that would evaporate into a record only if they completed every inch of it without a stumble." The notary commission was surrendered with a stamp, a sound too soft for the weight of it. The judge looked at Juliet a beat longer than necessary. "You treated guardianship like a shortcut around consent," she said. "The law does not exist to make your impatience easier." Juliet's mouth was a line. Karen stared at the seal on the wall like it might blink first. When asked if I wanted to speak, I shook my head. The paper with my words was enough. The judge read a few sentences aloud anyway, quieting the room. You can feel, even in a space designed for procedure, when a true thing lands. Ethan wasn't on the docket that day. His cooperation would be logged elsewhere, in a room with gray carpet and a recorder with a red light. He sent no letters. Good. The boundary stood where we had placed it. 2 weekends later, Lucy dragged me to the community center with the kind of energy you use to pull someone from heavy water. "They're hosting a Saturday fair," she said. "Tables with resources, free shredding truck, pet vaccinations. You love shredding." "I love records," I corrected, and went anyway. In the far gym, the senior services table had a line. A woman with a walker asked about power of attorney. A man with a cap that said Korea wanted to know how to freeze his credit. The volunteer behind the table was young, nervous, and very earnest, flipping a binder like it was a Bible he'd just learned to read. Across the room, through a doorway, into the smaller dance studio, I saw him. Ethan. In a volunteer t-shirt 3 sizes too big, holding a broom like a farmer holds a fence post when he's listening. He wasn't sweeping yet. He was listening to a woman explain why the floor mattered for people whose feet remembered more than their minds could tell. He nodded, and then, when she was done, he swept, not for show, not with drama, but with attention to corners. Lit by fluorescent lights and a good pen. At home, the basement no longer smelled like worry. I had scrubbed it on a Monday just to make the week start different. The ledger box was gone, handed over to Maya months ago. The shelves were reorganized with holiday decorations in clear bins that smiled instead of sneered. I'd set a small table near the stairs with a lamp and a stack of forms. Advance directive templates, a checklist for title monitoring, a sheet with bank fraud unit numbers and the sentence to say that opens the right door. On Wednesdays, I made tea and propped the back door open and let neighbors wander in with their questions. They started calling it clinic, which made me laugh because nothing here required a stethoscope. John sat by the water heater with his baseball cap and showed people how to angle a camera so it caught what mattered and not, as he put it, 3 hours of raccoon butt. Mrs. Ramirez brought empanadas and admitted she had believed a story because it wore church clothes. Julie, with an I, cried and then laughed and then told everyone to get a godchild who could out-text a scammer. I didn't give speeches. I sat and I answered. And when someone said, "I'm sorry, this is probably a silly question," I said, "Silly is for hats." We collected the kind of wins that don't make the news. A credit freeze completed. A suspicious investment opportunity deleted. A power of attorney ripped up when someone realized it handed their life to a person they wouldn't trust with their dog. In March, the DA's office held a small press conference, the kind of thing that shows up as a ticker tape on a slow news day. Maya spoke in nouns and verbs. She didn't use my name. She used the words pattern, prevention, prosecution. Dr. Harding stood behind a podium somewhere else and apologized to any patients who felt distressed. Karen's name appeared once in the note. I just wanted you to know that I am trying to be the kind of man Dad could sit beside without going quiet. I folded it once and slid it under Robert's watch, a small museum of what remains. The house didn't change its breathing. Neither did I. The letter wasn't a key. If one ever existed, it got lost in the years between the first, "Mom, can you?" and the first lie dressed as care. But the letter was a light somewhere else on the street. And I was old enough now to let other people's lights be theirs. Lucy came over the next day with flour on her cheek and a story about a kid who had tried to turn a book report into interpretive dance. We baked. We burned one tray. We ate around the edges. She looked around my kitchen and said, "It's funny. The room is the same, but it feels different." "It learned my name again," I said. That night, I stood at the back door and opened it. The jasmine was a dark silhouette, an ordinary hedge doing an ordinary job, separating a thing that was mine from a thing that wasn't. The air was cool enough to wake the skin. I left the door open for a minute, long enough to remind the house that safety isn't secrecy, and that we had nothing to hide. Before bed, I checked the mantle camera out of habit and realized I didn't need it anymore, not as a sentinel. I left it anyway. Not every safeguard is a scar. Some become artifacts, a reminder of a time when you had to prove something that should have been obvious, and you did. I turned off the lights. The hallway glowed with its small, generous wattage. Upstairs, the new trust binder pressed its rectangle into the fabric of my life. The watch ticked. The letters rested. The house breathed, and I breathed with it, and the rhythm matched. Tomorrow there would be clinic. Someone would bring a shoebox of paper.
Mrs. Ramirez brought a tray of empanadas so consistent they could calibrate scales. Julie with an IE had a spreadsheet she called the Nope List. Numbers of scammers, scripts of pressure. The soft voice to use when saying no is a kindness to yourself. We didn't fix systems. We gave people shorter paths through them. On a Tuesday, Rena called. protective order expires next month, she said. We can extend it if you want, or you can let it sunset. You set the weather here. I'll let it sunset, I said. Not because the sky is clear, because I know where my umbrella is. She chuckled. You're good at sentences. I've had practice, I said. A week later, a postcard arrived from the senior center 2 neighborhoods over, the kind printed cheap and bright. On the back, a note in tiny letters. Floors clean enough to eat off. I don't, but I could. M.E. It took me a second to decode the initials. Mr. Ellis, the man who didn't remember names but remembered the feel of a broom moving like a metronome over wood. I tucked the postcard under Robert's watch with the others, a museum of small proofs that life keeps making little lights, no matter what large darknesses try to do. On the first Wednesday in May, clinic was crowded. A woman with hands like maps brought a shoebox of paper and said, I was embarrassed to ask my son for help. I told her embarrassment is the tax good people pay on other people's bad behavior. We sorted the box into 3 stacks, keep, call, shred, and when it was done, she looked 10 pounds lighter without moving an ounce. At noon, there was a knock at the back door. 2 soft taps that didn't demand, just asked. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened it to find Lucy with a bag of groceries, and that way she has of showing up without making you feel rescued. Soup? She asked. Your no is a complete sentence. Yes, I said, surprising myself with the clarity of it. 10 minutes. Memory Cafe. Saturday morning, the table by the window. Rena sits with me. Done, Maya said. I'll set it. I got there early. The Memory Cafe wasn't a cafe at all. It was a sunny room in the back of a church with carafes of coffee and a piano no one felt pressured to play. People milled in gentle circles, name tags with first names only, staff who knew when to step in and when to step aside. Rena sat at my table with her legal pad unopened, a cup of tea gone cool. Ethan arrived on time. He didn't bring flowers or excuses or the hunger eyes of a man looking for a back door. He took the chair across from me and put his hands on the table as if to prove they were empty. 10 minutes, he said. Thank you. Rena stays, I said. Good, he said. He looked older in the light, not in a sad way, in a way that suggested a person had stopped trying to rewind. I'm not going to tell you what I've been doing, he said. Maya tells you the parts that matter. I'm not going to ask you what I can do to make it right. I know the answer is, keep doing the right thing when no one is watching, and don't call that a gesture. He slid a book across the table. It was thin, the spine cracked, the cover faded to a blue that remembered being brighter. Harold and the Purple Crayon. I hadn't seen it in decades. I found it in a box in the back of a closet, he said. You used to read it to me when Dad traveled. You said, you can draw your way out if you remember where the door is. I forgot. I wanted you to have this, not as a key, not as a trade, just as a thing that belonged to you, and maybe... He stopped, breathed. Maybe to the person. He left the way people leave when they understand the difference between a threshold and a finish line. Rena didn't speak for a full minute. Then she said, That's the cleanest 10 minutes I've seen in a long time. I like the quiet, I said. On the way home, I stopped at the library and found a copy of Harold and the Purple Crayon that hadn't lived in a box. I checked it out with my card that still had the old barcode from a System 3 software updates ago, and walked the neighborhood like a person who knows where she is. Back at the house, I set the worn copy Ethan had brought on the mantel, next to Robert's watch, beside the letters and the trust binder and the postcard of a clean floor. It didn't open a door. It didn't announce forgiveness. It was, like most true things, smaller and sturdier. A page from a book you know by heart that still teaches you how to draw a line and then step over it. The jasmine hedge moved in a breeze that made the kitchen curtains lift and sigh. I brewed tea. Clinic would be here tomorrow, and someone would show up with a plastic bag of papers and the story that they were not good with money, when what they meant was not good at saying no. We would sort the papers. We would teach the sentence. We would pour coffee and draw paths with pens. In the evening, I pulled a letter from the drawer and wrote to no one in particular and to everyone who might need it. If you are afraid because the people who should have loved you turned you into a plan, here is a list. Make a copy of your name in places paper can protect it. Freeze the numbers that let strangers pretend to be you. Tell a neighbor who listens more than they talk. Put a small camera where the whispers walk. Learn one phone number by heart that opens a door to a person with a badge. Sign your power with someone who won't trade it for convenience. Remember that guardianship is a tool.
#meta, lec, pause, sex 0.05. The watch ticked without hurry. Spring came like a decision. I had made it.